Hello friends, my name is Anshul and you are watching our channel The Insight Coders. In this specific video series we started with what is Spring Security, how exactly it works, the very basic stuff that you must know before going towards the JWT. From this specific video we'll understand in detail about what JWT is, how is the structure, what are we going to do in the upcoming videos to understand to create a JWT token and use it overall in the projects. So without any further ado, let's get started. So here, like in detail, we'll be discussing about the JWT token. But before going forward, let's see what JWT is. So JWT stands for JSON Web Token, that is JWT, and you must be knowing that it has become very important whenever we are making any of the projects, since we understood what authentication and authorization is and what is it the importance of Spring Security, and we'll be using JWT tokens to do that. So what exactly are the importance of JWT tokens, right? So let's see what it is, how to implement it, and everything in this specific video. So let's get started with what JWT is and how is it used over the applications. So the very first thing is we have a client and we have a server, and the client is requesting something from the server. Since it is requesting something and this client must be a valid person, so to have a secure communication, we already discussed that we need something, and that something is JWT token. So if the person has the valid JWT token and is the right person, so we'll get back the response to the client. So we can simply say JWT is used to securely transfer the information over the web, that means between any two parties, right? Let's see how it can be used further to exchange the information and authentication. What exactly is the process? This was a very basic level thing. Let's understand this thing in little bit detail in the upcoming slide. Yeah. So here in this specific slide it is saying, so for example a client wants to communicate with the application. So we have seen to have a secure communication we need something, and that something was our JWT token. Now the thing is the server is having a JWT token, but is that token a valid token or not? So for that the server internally has to verify the token, right? And we have already discussed what JWT is. It is a sort of something like a person has given that you belongs to our society, you belongs to our server, and our application is open for you, but only if you have this signed a valid token. If you bring this token along with you, then only we'll be able to access our application, otherwise we won't allow you to access the application, right? So the person has brought the signed token along with him, that is the JWT token, but our server has to validate it again, correct? And once he verifies it, our server will check if it is a valid token. So here can be two possibilities, either it will show true or false. So let's go with the false example first. If the JWT token that the person has brought is not a valid JWT token, so for in this scenario it will simply throw some error, and that is generally 401 unauthorized or 403 forbidden. It can be anything, that depends upon your application, right? The next scenario comes if this valid JWT token verifies was absolutely correct. So what will happen? Whatever the client has requested will get the response accordingly and will get back it to the client. So the basic stuff was client has brought the JWT token. It was the signed token that we talked about must be there, and the server has to check if the signed token is valid or not. If it is not, we'll simply throw an error, and if it is, we'll get back the response to the client. But in the next slide, let's initially understand how exactly JWT internally works. What is the structure of JWT? The very basic structure of JWT is pretty simple. It says it has three elements which are dot separated and even color coded. So you can see the first element is in blue, which shows we have some headers. The second element is in green, which is the major part, the core of our JWT, which is payload. And the third thing that you can see in the red color is actually the signature that we'll be using. So this is a very basic structure of JWT, and here you can see one thing, that what exactly are the things we have covered in these three categories. The very first category is the header. So header generally tells what type of token it is. It is a JWT token, which is the algorithm that we have used to sign it. So it is HS256 in this scenario. We have multiple algorithms here. HS5 and 2 RS algorithms are also there. So we generally have these two categories of algorithms. The payload says it has all the subject name, the expiration time, the main, all the claims that you want to store into your token. So everything, all the data that you want to store in your token to so that your server is able to know more about you, so that everything is being stored in the payload section. And in the end we have a signature, and you can see it is mentioned that we have all these algorithms as base 64 encoded. So that means if you have you have this data, correct, and you have from this data you want to convert a JWT token, so you have to encode it somehow. So this encoded is done using a base 64 algorithm. Even though if you have to decode from a token to get back the header, payload and the signatures, even though you have to go with the same base 64 decoder for that specific scenario. Coming back to the next slide. So the next slide is very important for the upcoming videos. So this slide actually shows, we have seen user brings the JWT token along with the request and gets back the response if it is valid. But how exactly are the steps in sequence working? So that sequential steps we'll be discussing in this slide. And this slide is not just important for this thing. This is how exactly we'll be working in the upcoming videos also in the coding part. So the hands-on is completely dependent upon this specific slide. So I believe it is a very important slide. So please be attentive here. Secondly, okay, let's start with this for initially. So a client requests something to the user. So this is the very first thing, but we have already discussed in the even in the first lecture itself. For every request, the person must be authenticated. So the first step generally is the login step, where the person sends their username and password, and if the person is being authenticated and his the correct username and password is sending, so in this scenario the third step states that we'll be generating a JWT token. So that means initially we have username and password. Once it is done, a generation of JWT token is taken place at the server side. Make sense? Next step says if the JWT token is being generated, so we have to send it back to the client. Correct? Now the client is having the JWT token, he can request anything for the secure communication. But let me tell you one thing. Here comes one point, that's for example, the person has a JWT token, he requests something along with this JWT token and he'll get back the response. But what about the subsequent calls? It is not just like they want to do it for a single call. They want to do it for all the subsequent calls. They want to use the same token unless until it is being expired. So the fifth step says you have to save your JWT token somewhere on the client side so that you can use it time and again for all the subsequent calls. So the methods to save are different. Like you can either save it in the cookies or in the local storage or howsoever the client wants to do that. Next type is, now you have the JWT token and you send the JWT token back in the header. So here the person is making any HTTP request, say to show the products. So HTTP requests we have already discussed are stateless, and these stateless, they are not storing anything. So they don't know the previous JWT. What was the previous JWT that you have asked to the same server in the previous one. That's why we have saved it somewhere, and every time we'll be sending back them in the headers. Now the client is requesting something, client is also having the JWT token, but what the server is supposed to do? The server will only and only send if the validation of that token is correct. So the major steps that we have seen over here is, like if you have observed, these steps were actually done from the client side. The server side steps, what are the server side steps? Let's go through them again. The person tries to authenticate itself. We generate a JWT token and then we validate it. If the token is valid, we'll send back the response to the client, whatever the person was being expecting. So this is the major steps that we are going to follow in the upcoming slides as well. But the point comes that I have discussed that we have to send it in each and every HTTP request, but how exactly it is done? So generally it is done via key value pair, that is known as a key as authorization and value as bearer space whatever was the JWT token that you want to pass. So this is the major flow. Let me quickly show you how exactly we are going to do that. Okay, coming back, so here we have a user whose username and password is admin. If I click on it, we'll discuss it how it is being generated in the upcoming slides. I'm just trying to show you how exactly you are going to pass this JWT token. So the token is being generated. Here we have two ways. So you can see there we have multiple tabs. We have one tab as headers. So in this header, we'll just write authorization, and then in the value I mentioned we'll be writing bearer space whatever is the token that we have. And once we click, you can see we have the output here for this hello user. The second way to do the similar thing is in authorization tab we have multiple ways, and you can see we have a bearer token as an option. So here authorization as a key is already set because we are in the authorization thing, and bearer space is already set. You just have to pass the token over here and you'll see the results back. So this is what I was trying to show you. The first way was in headers, the second way was in authorization. One more thing, we have an official site of JWT.io where you can decode your whatever JWT you have. So I'm pasting my JWT token. So you can see I have decoded it using 512 algorithm. The payload section shows that my subject is admin since the username was admin. I have kept one variable that is admin, and that is true. Expiration time is something which is decoded by JWT themselves. Then we have the third section is signature, and here you can see whatever is a secret key you want to pass to decode it. Make sense? So that we have discussed, we have three sections: header, payload and signature, and this is what it is. So this was all about this specific video. In the upcoming videos, we'll see how exactly we have to write the code to generate the JWT, to validate the JWT, and before that how exactly Spring architecture works hand in hand with the JWT. So we'll be discussing everything in detail with proper hands-on with a very basic examples. Stay tuned and don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video with your friends. I hope this video is very helpful for you. And if you have any doubts, please feel free to reach us in the comment sections. I'll try to answer all the questions over there. Well, this was all from my side. Thank you so much.